Welcome into the podcast for all fans of the best basketball league in the world. For the next 24 minutes, everything you need to know about the NBA is given to you in the simplest of ways, straight to the point. No overloads of stats or articles, just telling it like it is so that even a non-NBA fan becomes a fanatic. So get ready, warm-ups just ended, and the possession arrow belongs to...
And welcome back. It is another edition of the Throwing Elbows podcast with me, your man, Eddie D. And, you know, I didn't want to take long when it comes to the first guest of the show. And it only took 4 episodes to get there. I wanted to establish some grounds a little bit, get used to me before I started introducing you to some other people. And, the tagline of this podcast is, it's an NBA podcast by an unlikely NBA guy. This guy that I have next to me is someone who is a more likely NBA guy, and I'm going to tell you why. It's a good friend of mine, Andrew Thomas. Andrew, I want to thank you for joining me. Andrew's a student manager at the University of Pittsburgh men's basketball program. Yes, Jeff Capel, Justin Champagny, all those guys, Andrew's quite familiar with. Finance major as well at the University of Pittsburgh, and I can't thank him enough for joining me. Andrew, you know, you didn't go to Pitt originally being a student manager. And you and I, before then, obviously, were on the same field as far as an NBA fan. We have our opinions. We have our knowledge of the game. We've played fantasy basketball, things like that. So we have our own ideas as to what it takes to make a great NBA player or just an NBA talent in general. And coming from Western Pennsylvania, we're not – the reason why the tagline says unlikely is because it's not necessarily a basketball hotspot, especially with there being no NBA team in the city of Pittsburgh. But high school recruiting and such, high school basketball isn't – I mean, recently with guys like Ethan Morton and such, it's been getting better of the collegiate talents, but typically it isn't. So based on your old opinions of what it took to be an NBA player and now what you've seen traveling with college, with a Division I Power 5 college program and going on the road and playing their opponents and just being in the locker room of one, how has your opinion changed of what it takes to be an NBA talent from what you've seen at the college level?
Well, Ed, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. I was hoping to be a guest as soon as you announced the launch of this pod, so happy to make it happen. So for your question, it's kind of a boring answer, but you know, the biggest thing, very cliche, but it's work ethic, what you're doing in the gym. So you know, I think there's a big gap between your NBA player caliber, work ethic in college and people who are just there because they're talented. So before I got to be a part of the program, I always just kind of thought talent is what carries you. And I mean, to one extent, that is what happens, you know, talent kind of cream rises. But you can tell if you're putting in the work, the people that, you know, are the most talented are going to stay that way. And you can bridge the gap if you work hard. And that's just what I've seen with our guys. We have, you know, some older guys that started off kind of role players. And, you know, just through off seasons, I've been doing workouts with them and you can see their progression and, you know, their names are coming up in terms of, you know, are they going to be pros or not?
So when I originally posed that question, I'm expecting an answer. Obviously, I don't know what I'm going to get, but I'm expecting the answer of something like, oh, well, you know, the NBA is looking for ball handlers now, or, you know, you see a lot more shooters in the NBA now. So really it just comes down to work ethic then? I mean, obviously you work on those things, but that's the number one thing you have taken away and saying, hey, that guy's got a chance to make it at a next level. Maybe not the NBA, but just professional ball somewhere else in general.
Right. I mean, more skills are certainly more translatable to the NBA, you know, always value shooting, ball handling, versatility. And that's kind of another thing, you know, size and athleticism, positional size, really. So you're a 3 and you can guard 4 positions. It's a big asset, especially talking in the NBA. You know, they switch everything a lot of times. So being versatile. But I mean, yeah, like you said, there's definitely there's skills that are translatable to the NBA, but that comes down to work ethic as well. If you know you're 29% 3-point shooter in your sophomore year and you get in the gym and you turn into a 37% your junior year, you become much more attractive as a prospect.
Now, what are some of the keys, attributes, tendencies that you've picked up on when it comes to guys working on their aspirations of making it to the NBA? And I'm not just talking about guys at Pitt. I mean, you're there pregame, you're in the room talking about other players who are possible NBA talents. What do they stress the most when it comes to a possible NBA prospects game when it comes to your guys' game plan? Do you focus on their strengths? Do you work on your own matchups as far as your guys against theirs? What exactly do you look at when it comes to specific players that you can remember, instances where you've had to go against prospects that could be an NBA player?
I would say working on, maximizing your strengths. Everybody's got, strengths and weaknesses to their game. If you can really capitalize, if you know what your strengths are and you can exploit those every game. So if you're a lockdown defender and your job is to take care of the other team's best guard, focusing on that, or just stuff that you would do in a game is what you're working on. So if you're coaches always stress game situations, game shots, so if you're working out, and you're a two guard, you're not doing 8 dribble moves like you see these trainers do, these 8 dribble moves, picking up a cone, putting it down over here into a spin move jump shot. You're working on a pump fake 2 dribble pull up. It's you're not making a mixtape. You're building a resume for, what coaches can see in you in the future.
So that kind of leads me into my next question. We see all the time how the best college players don't always translate into the best NBA players. In fact, it's a lot. I think it's the least rare, at least between the 4 major sports. I don't know much about hockey recruiting. I don't know that much about baseball, but it seemed to me like most times the best college basketball players don't always translate to be even NBA players at all, let alone good ones and stars. Obviously, there are a good crop of, a decent bit every draft. But why do you think that is? What's the biggest difference between the college and pro game that makes those players not worthy of the next level?
So I think there's kind of 2 answers to this question. They're kind of opposite. One would be, a name that comes to mind for me is Miles Powell. So dominant in college, great scorer, one of the best players in the country last year. Kind of undersized for what he does. He kind of plays like a 2, more built like a 1. But so there you have somebody who's extremely intelligent basketball player, great IQ, knows how to put the ball in the hoop. But so he can take advantage of young college players that, aren't necessarily mature enough to guard him, or, don't know the nuances of his game. When you're in the NBA, I think that gap is a lot smaller. Mm-hmm. There's athletes that can cover you up, take you out of a game if they want to. So there, that would be an example of kind of lacking positional size or athleticism that can, keep you above that level that you're used to. Luka Garza, kind of the same way. He's dominant. He's a smart player, very good at what he does. But I mean, through mocks and everything I've read about him projecting as an NBA player, it just kind of style of play and, his transformation into an NBA player isn't as smooth as somebody who's, maybe more athletic and not as polished, like a rim runner or something like that. And that kind of brings me to my next part would be, if you're an incredible athlete, if you're Zion at Duke, you can dominate a college basketball game through your sheer strength and athleticism and quickness. When you get to the NBA, surrounded by the other best athletes in the world, that, you can't just do that. You have to rely on skill and, IQ to get to your spots. You can't just, there's great college athletes that are average NBA athletes, and that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. So it takes a mix, you think, of that knowledge, some of those, because obviously at the NBA level, the IQs are more evening up to each other, but at the same time, there are guys who get the game more than others. So do you think it takes a mix of those smarts, the mental game, and obviously having at least a basement, a floor level of that athletic ability to at least make it there? Some guys, so what you're saying is some guys have so much mental but not enough physical, and some guys have enough physical but don't really quite get the nuances of the game still. They might just fit into North Carolina's system or Texas
Exactly.
system.
So Luka Doncic, he's obviously didn't play in college, but he's built like your average everyday guy.
Mm-hmm.
But he wins the game with his mind, right?
His skill. He's very skilled, but he uses
exactly.
that to his advantage. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's not necessarily blowing by you, but he can use deception, hesitation to get by you. Whereas, Jaylen Brown came into the league so raw, right?
Yes, he did.
Not kind of disappointing at Cal. They had a bad season. He came in, was kind of underwhelming his first couple seasons. Just he was a great athlete, and that's why he projected so high, but it took a while for his skills to catch up to his athleticism.
Which it ended up doing so. I loved
exactly.
I got a good laugh a few weeks ago. I think you tweeted, you said, "Are we sure that Jaylen Brown isn't as good as Jason Tatum, if not better?" And then I think it was either that night or the night after Tatum scored 40. So then you tweeted at yourself. You said, "Of course, that's what happens when I tweet this."
Right. I try to come up with an interesting take, and Tatum just makes me eat my words. But
I actually fully agree with you, and we're gonna just to hopefully, if you stick around, we have both of our top players at each position in the NBA under the age of 25. So little room for debate, little room for discussion coming up here in just a little bit. But one big topic that I talked about in my last episode was load management and the NBA regular season. Obviously this year, you can't take too much. You kind of take everything as it goes. We're seeing now, especially, how many games are being postponed to later dates, and we don't really know what the NBA season has in store for us, at least in the near future. But traditionally, and I'm on record of saying this already on this podcast, and I'll say it until the day I die, the NBA regular season is arguably, and it is to me at least, the least meaningful regular season of the four major sports in America. Do you agree about that? And what do you take away from an NBA regular season that you can at least go into the playoffs and say, when you're in an argument with somebody or you're trying to argue for a team, you can say, well, they did this in the regular season and it means something?
Yeah, I totally agree with your point about the, NBA regular season, kind of them taking it the least serious out of all four major sports. I think that kind of comes from, I listened to your last pod and you brought up how LeBron, it doesn't matter where he is. If he's got a top 4 seed, he'll play who he has to play and he'll do what he has to do. And I think that's kind of a lot of their approach, especially with the load management. They'll take some games off. They don't care if they lose. So to the next point, where I think it's hard to extrapolate from the regular season to the playoffs. It's a different style of game in the playoffs, so it's hard to, tighter defense, less possessions. It's hard to extrapolate, and you can see that season to season how it's different. For the regular season, I think you kind of got to take your regular season performances for what they are. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be as successful in the playoffs, but if say Zach LaVine's averaging 30 a night, you got a game plan for him getting 30 on you. So, they're going to do in the regular season what they've been doing. I don't really see that changing much.
So, in one of my other points about the regular season is that records don't mean as much as far as how you play and how good you are as a team, your chemistry on offense and defense, and how you just play the game. And that goes back to my point about, doesn't matter which seed the best players have. They know that if they're on a good team, they can beat anybody. They could beat the 1 seed if they're the 4 seed. It doesn't matter. We've seen that, like you said, time and time again with a man named LeBron James. So is there any way you think that the NBA could look at making its playoff bracket better by making the regular season mean something? I've heard things in the past about overall seeding it 1 through 16 without conferences. I don't know if I technically agree with that. I go back and forth, but something like that, some gimmick to where if the NBA did this in the regular season, it would, or to the playoffs, it would make the regular season mean something more. Do you have any ideas off the top of your head? I know this was something I didn't pose to you earlier, but.
I mean, I agree with what you said about the 1 through 16 seeding, and I don't think that'll ever happen because, if the East is worse, those top 8 East teams, those owners are not going to give up that money to be in the playoffs to, get 12 teams from the West in. That's just never going to happen.
I'd agree with that.
But I think you've kind of already seen the NBA start trying to do this, first they started with changing lottery odds to, the bottom 3 have the same chance, and then it gets lower and lower, obviously. But it used to be the worst team has the best odds. And then last year with the play-in tournament in the bubble, they've expanded on that, and now it's 9 and 10 seeds are also in it with the 7 and 8. So that's what they're doing this year. I'm excited to see how it plans out, if that changes, how teams go about it, whether they really care about getting a chance to make the playoffs. I'd imagine they would, but
I loved how they did the bubble. I thought everything they did in the bubble was great.
Yeah, A+ for the bubble. That was a great execution and definitely creative on the league's part. But I just see them building on that. The mid-season tournament they've talked about, around the All-Star break, having draft implications or playoff implications, and then the play-in tournament. I think that's kind of their solution at the moment for the problem that they see there.
I didn't have this down as something I wanted to talk about, but it brings up an interesting point. NBA All-Star Weekend. I think that every year you get the same complaints about it, that the All-Star Game means the least of anything in the NBA. And I think the dunk contest is right above that All-Star Game just because the dunk contest has the prestige, but nobody really competes in it anymore of note. You don't see the NBA's best player going in those competitions. You see bigger names in the skills contest, not even the 3-point contest. But you mentioned something like a mid-season tournament that could have to do with seeding or guarantees in the playoffs for something. Would that be better than an All-Star weekend? You could still obviously name All-Stars, and I don't even know, you can maybe play the game, but we've seen it in things like the NFL with the Pro Bowl. Those All-Star games, those players don't care. They have maybe the $100,000 incentives and all those things that could help them, but they still don't care. What are they, that's pocket change to them. So is there something that could maybe replace All-Star Weekend, since the success of what made it the spectacle that it is in the first place maybe not there anymore? Is there something that could replace that?
I'm not sure. I think a lot of what All-Star Weekend is for is, I think it is what it is. I don't really know what you can do different to engage more people. I think a lot of the reason the All-Star break is there and it is where it is it's a week off for almost for 85% of the league that's
right.
Not at All-Star weekend, that they get a week away, a vacation with family. So I don't necessarily think so. And if they throw a mid-season tournament in place of that kind of takes away from that. And
would you do bye weeks in that case? Like maybe like one bye week in the first half of the season, one bye week in the second half? You
could do
and
that,
obviously or spread it out.
Yeah, or if you just keep All-Star Weekend where it is, you just like this year, you have a 72 game regular season, and you have a 2-week mid-season tournament where it's double elimination or single elimination. with, certain incentives to it. I don't know what those incentives would be or how to build that, but I don't see All-Star Weekend going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't either. But
even though I wouldn't be mad if they did away with it.
I certainly don't mark down my calendars and say I got to sit down and watch this. But
right.
Last question on this topic.
As a kid,
one word answer on this question. 82 games, is that too much for the NBA? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, we'll leave that where it's at. Let's get into the fun now. I think this will be the most fun part of the episode for the both of us. This is what I like to call, waiting for your food talk, as I like to say, because this is something that this is something Andrew and I, and anyone who knows us listening, this is what Joel, Schmitty, all of us would do. Zach Irwin talking about when the Buffalo Wild Wings while we wait for our wings. We'd argue stupid stuff like this. It's our top players under the age of 25 at each position in the NBA. Just for clarification, and obviously Andrew knows this as well, it's point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center. So your traditional 5 positions of basketball, even though every team doesn't really play like that. And for interpretation purposes, you could have someone like Jason Tatum at the power forward spot, even though I put him as a small forward. It's just how you interpret it. So if there's differences there, don't come at us. So Andrew, I'll start with you being a former point guard that you are. Who to you is the best point guard in the NBA under the age of 25?
This was the easiest pick for me. It's without a doubt Luka Doncic.
Okay.
He's putting up, ungodly numbers as a third year now, fourth year. But
yeah. Okay, this is the perfect start for interpretation because I don't have him as a point guard. I put him as a shooting guard, but yes, he is. Mm-hmm. He does bring the ball up every time. They do run their offense through and around him. So I considered putting him at point guard, but also I looked at how I made my decision on where to put Luka, depending on the second best player behind him at the point guard and shooting guard position. So the guy who I have as my point guard, I think, is the second best guard in the league under the age of 25 behind Luka. And that's the guy I'm repping right now. That's Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray, I think, is the best point guard under the age of 25. And this doesn't go back to the bubble. Obviously, that put him, I think, on the map of if he wasn't already a rising star, certainly one now, and maybe even an established one at that. But I think there's so much that goes around how he plays his game with Jokic as well. Jokic, you could argue, is a point guard. So how he has to revolve around Jokic and how he still gets his at the same time, I appreciate that. Obviously, the bubble was the bubble, and that kind of was the reason I ordered the jersey in the first place. And a funny story, you don't have to remember this. I don't know if you will or not, but it was one day after practice in high school. It was either after or before practice, probably after. We were at Buffalo Wild Wings, and for some reason we were riding home together because we lived nearby each other. And I said, "Hey, how's Kentucky looking?" Because it was obviously near the college basketball season. And this was, I believe it would have been the year after they were undefeated at going into the semis, and they lost to Kaminsky's Wisconsin Badger team. You said tragic. Yes. The fact that Devin Booker didn't start on that team, I know looking back they had the Harrison twins, but still, let's not get off topic. But the story is that I said to you, I went, "Hey, how's Kentucky looking this year?" And he goes, I liked what they got. They got this kid coming in along with Tyler Ulis coming back at point. They got this kid named Jamal Murray at shooting guard. I remember thinking, I was like, all right, sure. Jamal Murray, top recruit going to Kentucky, sure enough. And I love his game. I think Jamal Murray's a very, very talented player. So that's my first, every time I hear Jamal Murray's name or think about him, for some reason, that story is what I got. So my shooting guard, as I've already alluded to, is Luka Doncic. All the same reasons as you. I said it on this podcast before. You could make the argument possibly by the end of the season that he's a top 3 player in the NBA. I don't think with the way Kevin Durant's playing off his Achilles, you can put him at number 2 yet, but 3's pretty damn good too. So I'd say that's all right. So let's move on to small forward then. Oh, wait, what am I saying? You still have shooting guard. Who's your best shooting guard under the age of 25?
So I did the same thing you did, kind of. I thought about putting Luka at the 2, and if he was better than the 2 that I had, but I didn't think if my second point guard was better than the 2 I had. But my shooting guard, I'm going to keep it with Kentucky. I have Devin Booker.
Not a bad pick at all.
I think he's one of the best scorers in the NBA already. Only projects to get even better with a better team around him. So I think he's a top 3, maybe 4 point guard or shooting guard in the league as it is. So I guess that classifies him as the best under 25 in my eyes.
Oh, for sure. So we'll talk about this here once we're done with these positions, but Harden, Booker, who else would you put in that shooting guard category? Not even under 25, just off topic question.
Definitely Brad Beal. Brad Beal is probably the best.
Oh, yeah. So
probably
underrated.
the best in the NBA this season.
He's getting wasted in Washington. Not like actually,
trade him.
But like
he'll be the next. He'll be the next star traded.
Yeah, I hope so for his sake. I love Brad Beal's game. If he was under 25, he would be in my list for sure, and I'd have Luka at the 1. But yeah, do you think how much does Chris Paul help Booker's game in Phoenix now? I think it helps so much immensely.
I think he can play his natural position now. They had him on ball so much that he had to, and he adapted great to it. He became a better passer, better playmaker, which kind of helped him prepare for going back to the true shooting guard position he is now. He's a lot off ball, a lot of running around screens rather than, bringing the ball up, running pick and roll. So I think it's going to do wonders for his game playing with Chris Paul. And it's kind of off topic, but couldn't imagine a better point guard for DeAndre Ayton to learn pick and roll with than Chris Paul. I think that's
absolutely. That's all the NBA is really. Every possession almost in crunch time during the bubble of every game, every crucial game, it was a pick and roll. So, and the best players came out on top. Obviously, when you have a guy like LeBron and Anthony Davis, those two running a pick and roll, makes sense that they ended up winning it all. So let's now move on, as I rudely almost went past you, to the small forward position. I said it when introducing this segment, and that is that I put Jason Tatum as a small forward, therefore he has to be the best under 25. He's done nothing.
I did as well.
Okay, I was going to say he's done nothing but progress. A little bit of a step back in year 2. Maybe not necessarily a step back. He just didn't really get any better from his rookie season. But then, year 3 and this year, he's really stepped up his game to become in the conversation for that elite tier of small forwards. Not just – same thing with Devin Booker, not just under 25, but small forwards in general.
No doubt.
Yeah,
I love what he's done with his game. Just, he's really a 3-level scorer, can get it done everywhere, all over the court, can get to any spot he wants to. So definitely a tough guard in the NBA.
Do you think it's even more impressive that he did this progression really while Kyrie was there? I mean, I know Kemba came last year, and that's when he really took his biggest step, I'd say, but still had to develop alongside how young the Celtics are still. Jaylen Brown's also under 25. So that duo, and obviously Kemba Walker now coming into the Celtics last year, and hopefully he'll be back soon enough. Does that make it that much more impressive that he was not only developing around maybe a cancer like Kyrie Irving to start, but then also then being thrusted into the main role as the young guy and continuing to win and do so?
Absolutely. Definitely impressive. And I think right there you hit on it. He's winning while he's doing it. Devin Booker obviously didn't have the team around him that Tatum does, but he hasn't had a winning record in the NBA. Tatum's done it year after year while still, putting up great numbers as a first or second option and getting deep into the playoffs every time.
And now we're even seeing him
taking on LeBron.
Yeah, I was going to say now you were just getting into my point that we're seeing him go up, and we're going to have to see it more consistently, I think, but matching the performances of the top guys who are mostly on the wing nowadays in the NBA, and like LeBron, Kevin Durant, Giannis, such names like that. Let's move into a category where this is obviously up for interpretation because you don't see many true power forwards or centers in the NBA nowadays. Obviously, the days of small ball introduced by Golden not really introduced by Golden State, but almost made perfect.
Perfected.
Yes.
Yeah.
By Golden State. But for power forward, even though he plays probably center for the Miami Heat, I went with a Kentucky guy, Bam Adebayo. I love Bam's game. He's one of those that, Rudy Gobert, when he came into the NBA, he was all about defense. And Bam certainly has his offensive talents too, but on the defensive end of the floor, he is the anchor for the Miami Heat, along with Jimmy Butler. And to me, to win, you still need an inside defensive presence. Ask the Lakers; they have Anthony Davis. So I had to go with Bam Adebayo for my power forward, mainly because there's not many power forwards that good under the age 25 yet. And if you want to get on me about Zion, I'd be happy to take it.
No, I agree. I have Bam listed as a center.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of my backup center for this. I had a couple
fair.
For each, but yeah, no, the value he brings to defense is definitely, can't be overstated. His switch ability to be able to get out on a guard on the perimeter and stay with him. You've seen clips of him lock up Jamal Murray or elite wing talent, and he's able to stay with them step for step. I think that's huge.
Stayed with Jason Tatum in the bubble to make one of the biggest plays of the entire playoffs for them.
Right. And his ability to, grab a rebound and go, bring it up the court as a point guard, great passer. He's kind of like a Draymond Green type utility guy, good at everything. Especially, he's so young, he still has time to develop a shot, which I think he will. I can see that happening. I'm excited to see him, grow as a player as he gets older.
I am as well, especially considering, Butler's obviously getting older and he won't last forever. Obviously, Adebayo might be in his prime by the time Butler leaves. So Hero and Bam in South Beach, that'll be fun. That'll be fun to watch for years for sure. So who do you have a power forward?
I have Domantas Sabonis.
Wow. All right. I didn't think about him, but go ahead. I can see it, but explain your reasoning.
This year especially, he was an all-star last year, had a great season. This year he looks even better. He expanded his range to 3, can handle the ball. He's kind of like Bam on the offensive end, great in handoffs, can keep it on a handoff, great in pick and roll. He's tough as nails. He can, score around the hoop. He can step back. Offensive game, he's very talented. Defense, he's a bruiser, not as probably mobile as Bam, but man, can he bang inside and, probably one of the better post defenders in the Eastern Conference, I would say.
I respect the pick. I can honestly say I didn't think about Sabonis. He didn't cross my mind immediately when making my 5. And I think that might be because Indiana's just sort of, I call them that's their team. And when I say that's their team, they're just there. They're not, I don't consider them really a threat, but they're not bad. They're not one of the worst teams in any conference or the NBA. They're upper mid-card at best. So I don't really think about them, but you're right. Sabonis is a very talented player, especially considering that he got traded very early in his career. So I think when the general public or maybe your casual NBA fans, not your ones that pay attention night in and night out, when they see that somebody gets traded, especially as young as Sabonis was, they might say, oh, well, he must not be that good. If he was a good enough young player, then – and obviously that trade was for Paul George, but still, I think there's still that maybe that stench on him that some people would associate with him and saying, oh, well, if he gets traded, how good can he be? So I like that pick. Andrew, you said if you were going to come on, you needed a few days to prep. That was very impressive. I like the pick. So last, certainly not least, especially in my book, the centers, the big guys. You do see more traditional centers now in the NBA still, as a position. The big guy. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of talented ones in this category, specifically under the age of 25. One could be in Minnesota. We've talked a lot about these Kentucky guys, and by that grin might be giving away his pick, but I didn't go with him. I went with another man in the Mile High City, and that's Nikola Jokic. I'm a big fan.
I did.
You did too.
I did it too. Yep. He was my
Wow, you surprising me. That's surprising to me. I try to be unbiased about the Celtics on here, and so I can respect if you. But it's not a wrong pick to go with Jokic. It's not like you picked, I don't know, Precious Achua.
Right.
You picked someone who certainly has a good pedigree to him, and Nikola Jokic, who, like I said, could also be put at the point guard for this category as well when it's up for interpretation. But how he runs through that offense, how young he is as well. It's so surprising that he's under 25 to me, because it seems like he's been a monster and a triple-double machine for them for almost 5 years now.
Yeah, I know it's become normal, and we shouldn't normalize his greatness. It's amazing every time you see it.
And he's not. He has range. He has the ability to step outside, hit a three, but that's not where he centralized his game around. Unlike a guy like, I'll say it, Embiid is starting to make his game more about threes than it is inside, which always angers me about him. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'd know that. But something that Jokic does when he does offensively, when he's not passing, he is working around the rim. He is working inside, really just nice traditional post moves basketball, and I can appreciate that. So anybody can, if you're a basketball fan. So Nikola Jokic being our top center under the age of 25, I'm glad. It's justice. But I would have definitely accepted Cat as well, because he certainly doesn't go without talking.
I have even Bam ahead of Cat.
Really?
Right.
I don't know if I'd even agree with. I understand Cat's has one, but I gotta hear this.
I'm just gonna say, like, overall value, I think, Cat's been disappointing on defense in his career. Bam definitely outshines him in that category. Cat's a better scorer, but there's pros and cons to both. I don't think you could go wrong.
Right.
I love Cat's game. I love them both. So,
well, maybe with Edwards and Russell, maybe you get to see him shine a little bit more and maybe play a little bit longer. Because I always liked Cat's game too, all the way back when he was at Kentucky, being the centerpiece of that undefeated team, at least in the regular season. Don't want to try and strike a chord too much with you while you're here. I want you to come back after all. So, all right. So let's wrap this up, which is a shame because I've had a lot of fun, and I want to thank you again for coming on. Let's talk about the James Harden trade, because how can you not, right? It's arguably a top 5 player getting traded. You're obviously going to talk about it. But this wasn't just a straight-up 2-team trade. 4 teams involved in this one. I'll give those either viewing on YouTube or listening, wherever you get your podcast from, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you may get your podcast from. Let me go through how the Harden trade broke down for each team involved. The Nets received James Harden, obviously, and a second-round pick. The Cavs received Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince from the Nets. The Pacers received Karis LeVert. That's it. No picks involved with Indiana. And then the Rockets, here's where I'll have to clear my throat and do my research. They get Dante Exum, Rodions Kuruc. I did not say that right, but let him be relevant, and I'll learn how to say his name. Victor Oladipo, 4 first-round picks individually, and then 4 pick swaps, meaning whoever you traded that pick with, wherever they place in the draft, that's where you go to. So the Nets picks, their first-round picks are in 2022, 2024, and 2026, so apparently odd-year first-round picks mean a lot to that organization. The Cavs' first-round pick is in 2022, and then the pick swaps are in 2021, 23, 25, and 27. After all that, who won this trade? I feel like the answer is really, really obvious.
So
I'm not going to tell you who, but I just want to see if you get who I'm thinking.
I think the underrated winner is the Pacers. Just from, they only moved 1 player and they got 1 player back, but Oladipo's let it. He's got his contract's up after this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his contract's up after this year. He's let it known that he kind of wants out of there. So for them to flip an expiring Oladipo for a very promising young player in Levert, I think that was a sneaky good move for them, who also fits well with their current team. So I love that. Other than that, I'd have to say the Nets. I don't think adding James Harden to your team is never a bad idea. Even if you already have a crazy ego in Kyrie and you're adding another one in Harden, I think those three, KD, Kyrie, and Harden, will figure it out and be the best offense in the league.
As much upside as there is to the Nets acquiring James Harden, I have a hard time not seeing the downside too, because there's two ways you can say it. Well, there's multiple ways you can say how this trade worked out, but the two that stick out in my mind is, one, you get a top 5, arguably the top shooting guard in the NBA, to go along with a guy like Kevin Durant, and a former teammate in Kevin Durant, who obviously, all the NBA circle is well and true. You don't have to be on the same team to be buddies with someone, but nonetheless. And obviously Kyrie Irving can be a talent in himself. That's a big 3. You've gained that by getting James Harden. Then there's the other side that I can't stop looking at, is that you traded 3 first-round picks and 4 pick swaps, and you got rid of Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, 2 of your best young players in your rotation, and Taurean Prince was in the rotation too. Not a bad player, but someone worth who's expendable, for a 31-year-old shooting guard who is seemingly out of shape. I'm not his trainer.
No,
I don't have any insight.
Seemingly.
But you see what I mean? There's 2 ways of looking at it. One certainly good, one certainly bad. So I don't want to jump on the bandwagon immediately saying give the Nets the East already and just let them meet the Lakers in the finals, because I don't know how this is going to work. Because I think the best way someone put it on Twitter was, they said the Brooklyn Nets ball bag be like, and it's just a basketball that's all shred up. There's barely any leather or skin still on it.
Yeah,
so So that was, I have a hard time believing that they'll coincide at least this year. Maybe with an off season,
I agree.
But I think Steve Nash is the guy to do it, because I think he's not only a great basketball mind, but relatable to those players. But at the same time, you say relatable to players, that could also mean let them get out of hand. You see that?
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's just a cost benefit, trade-off that you have to do. And if you think that, giving up your future, pretty much all your picks until 2027, that's you're betting on now. So if you think Harden increases your chances of winning a title within the next 3 years, I think that makes it worth it for them, especially with, KD's 32.
Oh yeah, he's still in his prime and
So
he's going out probably, but I'd say he still is.
They're all on the same timeline now, and I think that's important when you're chasing a championship. Is if you have young guys who need some years to develop into the pieces that you need, and you have older guys trying to win a championship with what time they have left, I think that's not necessarily a recipe for success. So, if there's some overlap in timetables, I think that definitely benefits those teams. But yeah, it's just, Harden is an all-time offensive talent. KD and Kyrie are as well. So, I think you sacrifice giving up some young assets for what you think increases your championship odds. So I'm on board with it. I wasn't at first. I would, when they were discussing trades, I wanted him to see him go somewhere else, mostly because I kind of like the Nets. I like KD's game. I love KD. And I didn't want to see Harden, who has pissed me off these last couple years, end up there.
He certainly was in a system where basketball purity, as far as how beautiful the game can be when it's passed the ball around, and just great offensive motion as compared to Russell dribbles the ball as hard as he can into the floor like he's from Looney Tunes, and then rockets it over to Harden, rockets it to PJ Tucker in the corner, and then gives it back to Harden for a 3-ball, and that's it. Clink. And, that's awful. It made me want to gouge my eyes out watching the Rockets try to play on offense sometimes.
Right. I don't think the Nets are going to, it's not going to be Harden ball there.
No, I agree.
50 high pick and rolls a game. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I think he'll get into, which I'm excited to see. I want him to get to his, good Thunder days or his early Rockets days where he's kind of off ball, running around screens, being more of a 2-guard off ball scorer than he is just dominating and having a 50% usage rate.
For sure. Well, I think that's just going to about do it. And that's all we have on our agenda. Andrew, I want to thank you again for coming on, and best of luck the rest of the season. Pretty good start, and hopefully all is well. Stay safe, and who knows? Maybe we'll see you in March. I hope so. That'd be pretty cool. Then it gives more gravitas to the podcast. I can say that guy's on CBS right now on the sideline. Yeah, I had him. Yeah. But thank you so much again in all seriousness, and appreciate it. If you want to follow Andrew on Twitter, it's at Andrew, capital A, Andrew, _ capital T _ 3. So thank you very much again. And until next time, any last words before we get going?
Thanks. No, thank you for having me. Always great to chop it up like the old days. It was always some of the most fun conversations. We're talking basketball. So love to do it. Happy to be on. Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for tuning in. As always, every week of the NBA regular season, we'll have an episode out. And then once we get to the off season, we'll have more interviews like these and throughout the season. And then every other week, once we get to the NBA off season, we'll be putting out episodes, new content as well. For next time on the Throwing Elbows podcast, for myself, Eddie D, I want to thank my friend Andrew Thomas once again. And we'll see you next time.
Well, looks like the shot clock has expired. Never miss an episode of Throwing Elbows with me, Eddie D. The NBA podcast by the Unlikely NBA Guy can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other major podcast outlets. You can also find today's episode on YouTube. Search Throwing Elbows with Eddie D. Click on the first playlist you see. When the league's in season, so am I, as I'll be putting out new episodes every week of the NBA season. Be sure to come back next time to see what we got coming out of this timeout.